I'm Melissa Spiesman. I'm the Vice President, National Site Director for Food Rescue US. I've been with Food Rescue US almost since the very beginning and have watched the organization grow from one location to now 26 locations.
That's awesome. I love the growth.
Yeah.
Could you
Yes.
give us a brief overview of what Food Rescue US is?
So Food Rescue US is a volunteer-driven, technology-fueled, direct transfer food rescue organization. It means that we use technology to coordinate the movement of food from food donor to receiving agency by volunteers, all coordinated through the use of our proprietary software. And during normal times, or what were normal times, we were taking food that would be wasted. So food that was nearing its expiration date, food that was being pulled off of grocery shelves, overproduction in restaurants, corporate dining, hotels, stadiums, and delivering that to agencies in need. And during the time of the pandemic, we're just focusing on any creative solutions to the work that we can do, whether that's purchasing meals to keep restaurants open and employees working and food in the supply chain, or working with farms and farmers markets, while additionally still doing the work that we normally do, collecting food from groceries.
Awesome. Awesome. So I follow the next question goes right into that. So what role is Food Rescue taking in the fight against food waste? You touched on it, but if you could elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, so because we're in 26 locations around the country, we feel like we're really able to identify and address not only the issues around food waste and whether it's being wasted at the farm or in the restaurants or in the markets, but really also identifying these pockets of need that we're identifying. There's a lot of emergency food supply, so through the Feeding America network, but we also know that there are so many agencies and people that are not served through that network, and we believe that the Food Rescue US network of affiliates is really able to meet that need, and we're looking to grow.
Awesome. Awesome. And I volunteered with our local food rescue organization, and so following up with that, it seems like Food Rescue US is also changing the consumer and business mindset to create a system-wide change, because they're encouraging people to donate food. And when you volunteer, you're seeing the food waste too. So
what we always say about our volunteer experience is, in addition to the fact that it's simple, you sign up and most rescues take about 20 minutes from start to finish, but it's so interesting for our volunteers to not only see the food that's wasted, and it's unbelievable if you go to a market and see the amount of food that's being donated every day, or even at the end of a restaurant shift or at the end of a dining occasion. But when you bring it to these agencies and you see that the people who are receiving this food are basically your neighbors, and need looks very, very different. And again, especially during these times of the pandemic, where there's so much more need and so many more people who find themselves out of work.
Yeah. And you touched on a market, all the food that's thrown away at a market. So are businesses surprised at how much food can actually be saved from their establishment?
Yeah, I think that traditionally they're just used to, they prepare what they prepare, and then at the end of the night, the end of their shifts, they're dumping it. And they don't realize that it doesn't matter whether it's one sheet pan of food or many, many sheet pans of food, or, trays of food or boxes of food. They don't realize that what's a little to them means so much to those in need.
And what are some of those foods that you're seeing being recovered that's maybe unusual, or just something that people would normally think would go to a landfill?
So are you talking about during the time of pandemic or normal, in normal times?
Normal.
So in normal times, I think the restaurants don't even realize that even if it's a tray of potatoes that their restaurant might have, and they think, well, who's going to need a tray of potatoes? Well, if an agency is getting a tray of potatoes from them and then a tray of something else from another organization that becomes a meal. We know that the chefs at most of our receiving agencies who are serving meals are very creative and really know what to do and how to re-prepare so many of the foods that are donated. And I think that people don't even realize, even at the market, that when you buy a bag of clementines, and we all do this, and 1 out of the 25 is a little rotten, well, we still want to receive that bag of clementines because that means that there are 24 clementines in that bag that are still perfectly good to use. And I think that the mentality is starting to shift to understand, even in a carton of eggs, it's a carton of eggs and 2 eggs are broken, there's still 12 eggs in there. So I think it's really an awareness thing. And since Food Rescue's inception in 2011, I think that the face of Food Rescue has really changed and expanded to people looking at it in their own homes, when they're out dining, as well as when they're in the market.
Yeah, and that's a testament right to your growth that you've seen with the location expansion and more volunteers. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And you talked about maybe the clementines or the eggs or the sheet of potatoes that are coming to a chef at a receiving agency. And it's, once again, when the receiving agencies are not just handing out food, they're handing out meals. And Food Rescue US is enabling these receiving agencies to bring together all these different types of recipes that they might not have been able to get if they have to buy food from their local food bank.
Without a doubt, because they're able, I think what's happening, and we talk about this with fresh food and the quality of food that we're offering, is that we're not just giving people the staples of rice, beans, peanut butter, and jelly, which is on every food pantry's checklist, but we're giving them opportunities to have access to other foods that they normally wouldn't have. And, we talk about, there's so much education and so much conversation around healthy eating and eating healthy foods and making healthy food choices. Well, there's a part of our population that doesn't generally have access to that food or that population or those types of foods. And I think in every one of our locations, they can tell you a story where they've seen a grandma cry because for the first time they'd be able to provide for their family, a fresh orange or a fresh apple.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was volunteering at one of our receiving agencies for our local food rescue location. And there was a lady that came in, she had the shoplift for her last meal. She couldn't eat anything. And then we had a box of plums there from the local farm. And she just came and took 5 bags of them because it was her favorite thing. She hadn't had one since she was a little child.
Exactly.
And she wanted to share it with her family.
Yes. And we take for granted that we walk into a supermarket and that there is anything and everything available to us, and we can really, really pick and choose. And for so much of the compromised population, they don't have that kind of access.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's turn our focus back to the food donors.
Yes.
What have you experienced as the main reasons that somebody would donate food? Is it corporate responsibility goals? Is it an aha moment where they saw their waste, or what was that?
So I think that, again, going back to the conversation around the expansion of the food waste conversation, is I think people are becoming much more aware of food waste and its environmental impact. So I think that that's part of the conversation. Nobody understands the value of food better than a chef. So I think that they're looking at it more closely. I think many more people are having the aha moment of connecting the dots between what they might have considered food waste, in addition to what that waste could actually mean in a meal, as well as I think that people are now evaluating their waste for the first time. I think people are measuring their food waste and understanding how that impacts their bottom line. And even if they can't cut back on their food costs by purchasing less, they're understanding that they can stretch those meals and serve others with them.
You mentioned the bottom line. So that's one of the benefits of donating food. What are some of those other benefits that a food donor that wants to sign on would see, either in the short term or the long term?
Right. So I think there's, in some cases, there are the tax incentives to donating food. I think you mentioned corporate social responsibility, and I think that that really spreads through communities. So I think that when you're thinking specifically about restaurants, I think that restaurants like their customers to know that they're part of their community. I think their employees like to know that they're doing something else in their communities. I think in a lot of these kitchens, maybe some of their employees are the same people who are receiving that food. And I think that good community feel to what that feels like to be taking care of your community.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So for these food donors, when Food Rescue has approached them saying, do you want to make that leap of faith to donate food for the first time? What are some of the biggest misconceptions about rescued food or donating it? Because I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah. Oh, they definitely are. And I think we've all experienced this where the food donor, their first thing is, well, we don't have a lot of food waste. And I think that one of the things we try to go in and talk to them about is before you come right out and make a blanket statement of we don't have a lot of food waste, it's really trying to take an internal look at the kind of food waste that you do have. Why don't you spend a week and just look at it? And I think that after they spend a little time, they have to get their employees to buy in. But I think after they spend a little bit of time, they realize that, we do have food waste. And even though we don't think, again, going back to the one pan of potatoes, we don't think that that could really make a difference. When they really dig down deep, it really does make a difference in the lives of the people that they serve and in their communities.
And it's interesting too, the buy-in of the employees. At first, they're probably the ones that are most apprehensive of it, but then by the end, they're the ones preparing the food and saving it and spreading the message to their families and everyone else.
And they're loving it because in the beginning, I think you're right. I think that they look at it and say, oh, this is another bit of work that we have to do at the end of the night. It's so much easier to clean it up, to dump it out. But I think once they realize the impact that they can have with this food, and they know the time and effort that it went into preparing that food. Yeah. So I think that they really appreciate that they're stretching that food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the pride. You don't want to see what you work so hard on and make.
Exactly. Yep.
For the waste. Yeah. That's great. So talking with pride, I guess along that same lines, what have been some of the success stories of Food Rescue US and the movement as a whole?
Right. So I think when we talk about Food Rescue US and our successes, we certainly speak about being having 26 locations in 18 states. The fact that since our inception across all of our locations, we've rescued 39 million meals, 52 million pounds of food. So there's a lot of success in that. But to know that you've inspired as many people as we have to be part of the movement and join the movement and understand the impact that the movement is having. And we look at each one of our communities, and we'll speak about G Foods for a minute, to be able to bring people together around this, the mission of taking food that's grown for all of us and providing it to those who are less fortunate, all the time knowing that we're helping to save the planet, is really, really inspiring. Yeah. So I think that Food Rescue US really is proud to be a part of that movement and proud to help our partners succeed in their missions, but also proud to be part of what is really becoming a, if not, national, if not worldwide movement. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the national movement can be seen with the food rescue that occurred at the Super Bowl this past year. Could you speak a little bit about the biggest one in history?
Yes. So we rescued over 40,000 pounds of food at the Super Bowl. And we recovered food not only from in the stadium, but from events outside of the stadium. We partnered with our traditional partners that brought their own trucks to pick it up. We had our volunteers there, 36 or 38 volunteers over the course of 3 days to rescue all of this food. And really proud to have been part of that. And then right on the heels of that, we're looking at the work that's going on during the pandemic, where we're partnering with World Central Kitchen in Miami and launching community kitchens all across the country. On next Tuesday and Wednesday in Detroit, we'll be receiving 46,000 pounds of potatoes that'll be distributed out of 2 central locations in Detroit out to the community.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.